Our group is Sid, Isabella, and Sam, and we tested the 0101 alarm clock. We held the test in Odegaard Library because it's pretty quiet and has a very nice testing environment. The users of our test were college students because they were an accessible demographic, and every college student has a need for an alarm clock. The first task was to observe the alarm clock and to estimate how the user would think they would go about changing the time. We gave the users 15 seconds to observe it, and then had them walk us through how they thought they would change the time on the alarm clock. We had them range on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the easiest and 10 being the hardest, how difficult it was to gauge this. We then asked them for their first impression to the clock and if they found the instructions and buttons to be intuitive. The purpose of this task was to determine the complexity and design of the clock based off observation only. The second task was to change the date to October 10th and the time to 4:45 p.m. We measured the time it took the users to complete this task, the difficulty they found this task on a scale of 1 to 10, and had them rate their emotional state on a scale of 1 to 5 by choosing the phase they most closely related to from this graphic included on the slide. The purpose of this task was to measure the difficulty of changing the time and determine possible user frustration.
The last task was making the alarm ring. Our metrics are the duration, the difficulty of the task, and lastly the number of button clicks. We picked this task since someone purchasing this clock would likely intend to use it for its alarm function. We selected these metrics to understand how long each task would take, how many actions were necessary, and the task difficulty. When users were asked to observe the clock and estimate how to change the time, they gravitated to the instructions provided on the face of the clock. Their estimates were close to the descriptions provided on those instructions. They rated the difficulty of finding those instructions to be around 2 to 3, and felt like the text was clear and served its purpose. For changing the time on the clock, 2 out of the 3 participants completed the task. Both participants that finished had a time of 1 minute and 5 seconds, rated the difficulty of the task to 3, fairly easy, and they rated their stress levels to 4, low stress. One participant who did not finish rated the difficulty of the task to 7 and put their stress level to 3.
So for task 3 results, 2 out of the 3 users set the alarm in under a minute, with 1 user finishing in 1 minute 43 seconds. Users gave a range of difficulty rating with 3, 5, and 7 out of 10. The count of buttons clicked also ranged widely with 17, 31, and 53. And users found the description and placement of buttons a bit misleading, especially because the alarm button didn't necessarily do what it was supposed to do. Now, as for design recommendations, we'd really like it if you used icons with recognizable symbols. These are much better than simple text instructions. We'd like to minimize the amount of buttons on the clock, keep the display of the clock as simple as possible, as well as create an easy way to shut off the alarm once it is activated, so like a big snooze button. We'd also like to make the physical appearance convey more about the intended purpose of the product, and finally, minimize the amount of steps needed to set the time and date. Now, as for future work, we'd like to test in home location and as well test the emotional state prior to the experiment as a control for the emotional state question. We'd also really like to separate users so they can't observe each other during the test to eliminate some of that bias. And finally, we'd like to introduce the other functionality features of the alarm.